Mark Henry comes in and says some stuff about how he loves the business and he's here to turn the screws. And then he's asked if he's going to wrestle, and he said he's not going to say yes, but he's still got a lot left in the tank. This brought out Vicky Guerrero, who came out screaming about, excuse me, excuse me. And then she introduced Andrade El Idolo, in which the crowd went mild. There was like no real reaction for him at all. It took for, because I think maybe it was because I didn't really understand what Vicky was saying. I mean, because she was sailing in her shrill shriek voice instead of talking normally. She was in her character voice. And when I heard Excalibur say it, I was like, oh, okay. Now, even when he came out of the tunnel, there was still very little reaction to Andrade. Even when he came out of the tunnel, even as he stood in the ring, there were some AEW chants, which we all know that's not exactly a good thing. You're not chanting for the performer, you're chanting for the company. I don't know if I ever talked about this before. We'll talk about it right after this. I talk about this, though. So, Andrade says he used to call himself the face of the Latinos, but now he's going to call himself the face of All Elite Wrestling. So that's all he really had to say. He showed off a little bit. He looked like $1 million, and then he strolled out there and he walked away, and that was it. And all of a sudden, everybody's talking about how much of a star he is, and I was like, oh, okay. But to double back to what I was talking about, one of the things I forget who I heard this from. I'm not sure if it was Raven. I'm not sure if it was Al Snow. I'm not sure who said it, but it made a lot of sense to me when they said it. They said when you're chanting for the company and not the wrestler, then you know that there's like a problem. Like when he says, like, when you look at every company except WWE, which actually tries to put their brand first, people always chant for the performer. Let's go, Cena sucks, whatever, It's never WWE. That doesn't even make sense. But when literally everything else except WCW, you never get the WCW chant, right? But TNA, you get the TNA, ECW. Now you're doing it in AEW. And, I think even ROH had that. People doing ROH chant. There's something about chanting for the promotion that's weird, and it doesn't work. It doesn't get the characters and the personalities that you're supposed to get over. It's getting the company over. And then what happens when it makes everybody seem unimportant. And to that point, when they continuously stack these surprises, I've talked to, at length about this. And I know this is just an anomaly, right? Some people just don't want to admit that Andrade didn't get much of a reaction. It is not because nobody knows who he is. It's not because the big surprise, didn't work. He'll get a better reaction next time. It's just that AEW has started to stack these surprises where there's just continuously, like 2-3 times a month, there's a surprise entrance. And then I actually started seeing people say, like, wow, the roster is starting to get stacked. The roster is starting to get full, and like, who is he going to wrestle? And of course, he got all the quote unquote dream matches with people that he's, just good matches that he could have. Not that, characters or anything like that, angles that he could work. Just, he could have good matches with everybody. Like, he could have had a good match with Drew Gulak, but nobody gives a fuck. Like, it's really hard to have conversations, adult conversations with these people. But ultimately, Andrade is a great get for AEW, but it's not a surprise because he challenged Kenny Omega in AAA 2 months ago. Well, it was probably about a month ago. It was quite a while ago, So we already knew that there was a chance that he could jump ship to AEW, so it wasn't really that big of a surprise. Second, they continuously bringing in new talent, either guys that they're recruiting themselves personally, like guys that worked in the main event of this show. Even though, he was kind of a performance center guy, same thing, but whatever. But you have now a roster full of talent. Now you're going to begin with the question is who you're going to push and win. Like, When you like on this same show, you had Christian, who was the big sign last month, and he's already doing nothing tag team matches 6 weeks later. What about Matt Hardy, who was the big sign last year? He's been mostly forgotten and hasn't really progressed or done anything. You also had Miro, who was the big sign last year, who's finally starting to bloom into something special. You know, Lance Archer was a big sign last year. What has we gotten out of him? You know, when you look at some of their grand signings that these guys who are going to be changed the game, almost none of them have done so. You know, Pac was one of them. He hasn't changed anything. You know, nothing has really stuck. Nothing has really shifted the momentum like AEW really wants it to. And I think we need to stop putting pressure on these guys because they're just wrestlers, man. You know, like we want to treat everybody like they're a movie star. Like these guys are just wrestlers. And that's kind of how Vince sees them. That's why he fires these guys. You know, like he got rid of Andrade because he's just a fucking wrestler. No different than Angel Garza or any other the fucking Hispanic wrestlers. And it's unfortunate that, you know, some people see him that way, but until he proves that he is something more than just another fucking Mexican wrestler, then that's what the fuck he is. He's no different than every other Mexican wrestler that's on the roster. You have to prove yourself different. And of course I'm going to say, well, he got the opportunity now. Show and prove. You know, every time WWE fires somebody, that's pretty much the position that they put these guys in. It's like everybody's like, oh, we should have done so much more with Brian Myers. And it's like, okay, well, are you even watching him in Impact now? No. You know. So that's something to consider when we talk about all of these guys who've been released lately. You know, people swear like, oh my God, these guys are going to be such great gets for AEW. And it's like, nobody considers whether you should even have a roster so stacked, let alone, because that's why I say everybody keeps saying with WWE, like your roster is too stacked. You got too many people. And that's not a lie. But now AEW has been in business for not even a fraction of the time WWE has. And they have 3 running shows and about as many people on the roster. Something's going to give. You know, something's going to give. And I think it's going to end up being the guys on the downward spot. And it was the same thing with WCW. Vince couldn't hold on to, you know, that at that point it was he didn't want to pay Nash, he didn't want to pay Hall. He released them. They went to WCW, became a big deal, but then it ended up affecting all of the people who were working in that mid-card range. The Benoits and the Guerreros and the Jerichos and those guys. It started to affect them because Hall and Nash were bigger stars coming in to eating up all the TV time. And sure, these guys might have been getting paid well, but they weren't going anywhere. You know, there was no growth potential. It's similar why, you know, Andrade and these kind of guys are leaving WWE because there was no growth potential. So now they're going to go from being small fish in a big pond to being big fish in a small pond. So then what about all the other guys who were in AEW from the beginning but can't find their footing? Because, you know, hey, you signed us and we may be in the training facilities or whatever, but we can't get main events. Or if we can get a main event, we just lose and then go back to doing nothing. You know, it's eventually gonna fall apart. You know, so they need to really consider. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't sign anybody else. They should sign as many of these guys as they can get. You know, while their names and faces, or while their faces at least, are still in the public consciousness. So if you can get Aleister Black, you should get him. You know, if you can get the Iconics, you should get them. If you can get Lana, you should get her. There's no reason why you shouldn't. There's a lot of people that are on AEW's roster that WWE probably wouldn't even want, but they could do something for Impact or do something for another promotion, Ring of Honor or something like that. But AEW needs to help themselves and squeeze as much notoriety out of those names and those faces that they can get. I'm not saying sign everybody. I'm saying make good choices, make good decisions. Andrade was a good decision. He's a good choice.
Old non-aggression. Once that lesson sets in, you'll see a session. But you got an affection for no progression, regression. The best.